So you're excited about Brimstone coming out November 18th, 2025. That is the sequel to Quicksilver by Callie Hart. The only problem is you don't remember everything that happened in Quicksilver. I'm glad you made your way to this video. I'm going to refresh your memory on the most important events that occurred in Quicksilver, so that way when you get to Brimstone, you are not completely lost. I'm going to do a recap of the characters, as well as what happens to these characters and the overall plot that is covered in Quicksilver. However, if you are looking for a more in-depth, detailed summary of this book, I do have that available on my channel. I will drop that below in the description box. I'm anticipating that most of you who are watching this have already read this and you just need a quick reminder. So if you have not read Quicksilver, please let this be your warning that this video contains massive spoilers. If you want to experience Quicksilver for the very first time without spoilers, I would recommend one of my other videos. I actually have one on convincing you to read Quicksilver by Callie Hart. So go check that one out. I'll drop the link below in the description box. I hope this video prepares you for Brimstone coming out in the very, very near future. I don't know when you're watching this video, but it is already early November, so we only have a couple weeks before Brimstone is released. I hope you're as excited as I am. Before we go any further, I hope you consider subscribing to my channel. I love talking books. I would love to connect with you. So I hope that you stick around. I hope this video is helpful to you. And without further ado, let's get into some details about Quicksilver. Okay, first of all, before we talk about characters, we know what this book is about, right? It's about our main character, Ceres, who ends up accidentally opening a portal from the human realm, her world, into the Fae realm, okay? There she encounters a being who she mistakenly thinks is Death, who is actually not Death. That is actually Kingfisher, a very attractive, dark-haired Fae warrior guy. These two end up, having a romantic entanglement, okay? So if romantasy is your jam, then this is definitely something that you have probably liked. So yes, this is a romantasy book. We also have the enemies to lovers trope going on. We have several, actually 3 to be exact, very spicy sex scenes. So if you are into the spice, if you're into the smut, this book is going to definitely deliver, and I hope you remember and enjoyed those scenes in this book because they were rather fun, weren't they? We are, of course, going to start with Ceres Fane, who is our main female protagonist. She is a scrappy 24-year-old young woman. When this book begins, Ceres is a human woman. By the end of the book, Ceres has transformed into a half vampire, half fae. Ceres is what you would call an alchemist. She has this ability to transform Quicksilver. Now, of course, we have Kingfisher, sometimes also referred to as Fisher. Okay, we've already mentioned he is a dark-haired, attractive fae warrior. When he first emerges from the pool of Quicksilver in the Queen's basement, or I guess the Queen's dungeons is a better term for that, Ceres mistakes him as Death because she is dying and she thinks that he is there to collect her. But no, he's just this attractive fae warrior who is there because Ceres accidentally pulled what she thought was a lever at the time. It's actually the sword that used to belong to King Bellicon, okay? So this sword was snagged by Queen Madra. She used it to close the portal so that way no fae could enter the human realm and then exit back into the fae realm. Kingfisher is the stepson of King Bellicon. Kingfisher has an affliction. He has Quicksilver in his eye. It definitely has a negative impact on him. He requires the use of this amulet thing that he has to wear in order to prevent the Quicksilver from making him go absolutely insane. Kingfisher has some cool powers. Some would call him a shadow daddy, okay? He has the ability to control and wield shadows, much like some other characters in other fantasy books that you may have read. He also has the ability to summon what's called a shadow gate. When he does this, it allows him to move around pretty quickly to other parts of the realm. It's just kind of like a transportation device that he can create. We don't know how, but he can do it, and it's pretty cool. Next, let's talk about Carrion. I love that guy. He is hilarious. The stuff that he says and the banter that goes on between him and any other character is just wildly funny. I was wildly amused by this character, and I hope that you were too. He is originally introduced as a human who resided in the 3rd ward with Ceres, but as the book goes on, we discover that Carrion is actually fae. Carrion was able to hide his identity for a while because he had a glamour over himself that prevented others from seeing who he truly was. Let's talk about Carrion and Ceres. Those two got it on one time and one time only, okay? They just had a fling, I guess you could say. Carrion actually coaches Ceres on how to talk to the Quicksilver in order to get it to behave and to allow her to shape it because Ceres was really struggling with that. So we'll talk about that in a minute. The only other thing I want to say about Carrion at this point in time is that Ceres forages a sword for him, who he ends up naming Simon. I just thought that was so fitting. Of course he would name his majestic sword Simon. King Bellicon. King Bellicon is the king of the Fae realm. He is the father of Everlane and the stepfather of Kingfisher. King Bellicon is not fond of Fisher. So King Bellicon wed Kingfisher's mother, and so he was not really a wanted child for King Bellicon, but he had to just, I guess, by law, accept him as such, and he doesn't like him so much. I've already mentioned her, but Everlane, also known as Lane sometimes. She is another beautiful Fae creature who is the daughter of King Bellicon and half-sister to Kingfisher. I would say that Everlane has a minor role in Quicksilver. Her task really primarily in the beginning of the book is to help Ceres understand the Fae realm because this is her first time in this world. And she was also tasked with helping Ceres do research on how to make relics. More on that later. Queen Madra. Yeah, the nasty human queen. Not a nice lady. In the very beginning of the book, Queen Madra orders the execution of Ceres. Well, that kind of backfired, but yeah, we see that she is not a nice lady. Queen Madra had come to acquire the sword called Solus, who used to belong to King Bellicon. She came to acquire that somehow, although we don't find out until later, but she used it to close the portal so others could not travel between the human realm and the Fae realm. Heron is the queen's guard. He was granted eternal life from the queen, even though it's not a very pleasant experience. That dude is pretty beat up by the end of the book, and the dude should just die, let's be honest. He should not continue living. He is not well. Malcolm is king of the vampires. More on him later. Taladeus is second in command to Malcolm, though secretly in league with Kingfisher. Taladeus was enslaved by Malcolm, so he really didn't have a chance but to become his second in command, but as soon as he has the opportunity, he shows loyalty to Kingfisher. Lorith is a warrior and a loyal friend to Kingfisher. Kingfisher actually made quite a substantial sacrifice for Lorith back in the day. When Lorith was a boy, he was dying. Kingfisher gifted him with a piece of his soul to allow Lorith to leave. Now the problem with that is the stakes are real high for Kingfisher. If Kingfisher dies first, Lorith gets to live out the rest of his life while Kingfisher suffers somewhere in the in-between, I don't know, purgatory or something. But if Lorith dies first, then that piece of the soul does return to Kingfisher. So kind of a gamble on Kingfisher's part, but that was really there so we could see that Kingfisher isn't the asshole that Ceres believes him to be. We know that he has a softer heart buried somewhere under all of that crap. Talena is the healer that educates Ceres on the tattoos that suddenly started appearing on her body during intimate moments with Kingfisher. Those are bonding tattoos because she has officially mated with Kingfisher and she has 30 days to decide whether or not she wants to accept or reject the bond. Renfus is also another warrior, another good friend to Kingfisher. Hayden is Ceres' brother. He does not appear very much in this book. He has a very minor part in the very beginning when Ceres steals that gauntlet, which is what she got caught for in the very beginning, which got her in trouble with the queen and which ultimately led to her execution, which didn't pan out for the queen, but whatever. She gives the gauntlet to Hayden and Hayden gets caught like right away. He doesn't reappear later on in the book, even though he was supposed to, but anyways, he has a very minor role, at least in this book. We'll see what happens in Brimstone. I have a feeling he will be back for more. Onyx is Ceres' pet fox. Now, somebody correct me if I'm mistaken. I think he's called Onyx because his eyes are pure black, but his body is white. I believe that's the situation, so someone please correct me if I'm wrong. Danya, I was gonna say not a cute character. She is. She's apparently very beautiful. Carrion is wildly attracted to her, but she's not very nice. She has a pretty extreme grudge against Kingfisher because Kingfisher went poof. He disappeared for over 100 years without a single word as to where he was gonna be going. Well, not his fault, not that Danya knows that, but she was very unforgiving for the fact that he left them in a time of need. And she's not getting over that grudge so well. Also, Danya had a moment where she wanted to fight Kingfisher. In a moment of panic, Ceres ends up exploding Danya's sword, and it ends up in a million pieces and it gets embedded into the wall. After Ceres realizes her talent and how to manipulate the Quicksilver, she's able to reforge that sword, although the sword now kind of has a personality of its own, and it ends up accepting a bond with Lorith, not Danya, which Danya is pretty crusty about it, even though it is what it is. The sword liked Lorith. It accepted the bond, and so now that sword is Lorith's sword. Wendy, a very minor character that appears in Kingfisher's hometown. She receives Kingfisher with warmth, and it's clear that these two have a pretty nice, warm, friendly relationship. Not romantic, by the way, more of a friendship. This is an older lady. Elroy, also another minor character. He does not appear very much except for the very beginning. This is a friend of Ceres's who also resides in the Third Ward. Elroy had a pretty major thing for Ceres's mother, although it never panned out. Elroy is a glassmaker who refuses to help Ceres in the very beginning of the book simply because the risk is just too high. being caught reforging that gauntlet was going to potentially get him killed, so he turns her away. Those are all the characters I want to mention in this portion of the video. I just wanted to give you a couple extra things that I think may be helpful for future reference. We have something called the Triumvirate that consists of 3 people who we are led to believe are enemies against one another. They're actually in league with each other. That consists of Queen Madra, King Bellicon, and Malcolm, the king of the vampires. So those 3 are actually in league with each other. They call themselves the Triumvirate. These 3, pretty nasty. They ended up tricking Kingfisher into accepting a bargain, and they cheated on the bargain. The bargain would be completed when the coin fell to the ground, although the coin never hit the ground. So they used trickery to trick Kingfisher into trapping him into this horrible maze in the magicless land of the vampire kingdom. So Kingfisher spent 111 years in this horrible maze that led to this cavern full of coins. He was supposed to find the coin that was used to strike the bargain. Well, he was never able to find it, and it's because it wasn't even in that cave, right? Again, more trickery. The Darn is the river that separates the Fae war camp from the vampires. This is that scene where the warriors on the Fae side have to break the ice so that way the vampires can't cross. Yeah, pretty cool setting actually. And the land of the vampires currently, before the end of the book, is a magicless land. Not very fun. A bunch of souls are trapped, partly because of Kingfisher's involvement in the whole ordeal. All right, so the characters, what happens to them? We've already talked about who they are, but what happens to these characters? Cerys, we already know that she was caught for stealing that gauntlet. The queen orders her death, and Cerys is able to survive, even though she is severely wounded. She is taken to the Fae realm by Kingfisher via the Quicksilver. Takes a number of days to recover, and when she does, Kingfisher wants to task her with creating relics for his warriors. What he needs these relics for is to enable them to travel from realm to realm. This will significantly help them with the war that is going on between the Fae and the vampires. Cerys ends up being mated to Kingfisher. Originally, she is given 30 days to either accept or reject the bond, and in the end of the novel, we find out that she has accepted the bond with Kingfisher. And this is a union that is pretty serious. It is like blessed by the gods, so pretty cool. During her first intimate moments with Kingfisher, all of these tattoos just start appearing on Cerys's body, and she doesn't know why. Well, that's part of the mating bond, and Taylena explains that to her later on in the story. There's a moment where Cerys is trying to distract Kingfisher from his pain because the Quicksilver in his eye is giving him some grief. So Cerys is asked to share something with Kingfisher, and she goes, well, I don't really have anything happy about my life that I can share with you. And he goes, no, I don't want to hear something happy. I want to hear something real. So she tells him about her parents and how they are both deceased. Very, very sad. And also, Kingfisher and Cerys have this ability to communicate with each other through their minds. They don't physically or verbally have to speak with each other. They can hear each other just fine. They can communicate. Is it telepathically? Whatever that is, they can communicate without opening their mouths. At the very end of the book, Cerys is able to find the coin that Kingfisher needed to complete the bargain. So that was pretty cool. And because Cerys is able to complete the bargain, it frees Kingfisher as well as all the souls that are trapped in this magicless land, and it also restores this vampire kingdom to a land of magic. However, it came at a price because Cerys gets stabbed in the gut by Malcolm, so yeah, a deadly wound. But in retaliation, Cerys, pretty badass, is able to stab Malcolm in the throat and then behead him with the famous sword Soleus. Even though things are looking pretty grim for Cerys, well, guess what? She has a savior because Taladeus, who originally was Malcolm's second in command, he's actually in league with Kingfisher. He offers Kingfisher the opportunity to turn Cerys in order to save her life. The only problem is Cerys is fading so fast, this girl's like dying. She's got seconds. She doesn't have the strength to even consent to this kind of change, but Kingfisher consents for her. So Taladeus bites her, and the transition to vampirism begins. During this wonky transition, Cerys does go on this weird journey where she meets the god of chaos, and this god says that he has manipulated or tried to manipulate the webs of fate, the threads of fate, whatever you call it. No matter what he does, Kingfisher and Cerys always end up together. No matter what reality, no matter what happens, they are just fated to be together. There's not even anything that the god of chaos can do to separate these two people because they belong together. So sweet, right? Now, the entire book, Cerys's objective, her only goal is to get back to her own world, the third ward in the human realm, to be back with her brother. By the end of the book, she decides to accept the bond with Kingfisher, stay with Kingfisher, assist in the war efforts by creating these relics, and just stay. She doesn't really want to go back to her own world. Yes, she still cares about her brother Hayden. Yes, she wants to check in on Elroy, but her purpose is grander here in the Fae realm. And now Cerys is half vampire and half fae. And guess what? Here was the biggest twisty twist in the very end, is because she was the one to formally kill Malcolm, she is scheduled to become the new queen of the vampires. And that's exactly where Callie Hart left us at the very end of Quicksilver. All right, what happens to Kingfisher? So we've already talked about how he was banished to this maze in the vampire kingdom for 111 years. Can you imagine what that does to your psychology? For most of the book, Cerys considers Kingfisher to be a giant asshole because he is. He has changed. He is not himself, and we see other characters react to him very fondly because of who he was, not who he necessarily is today. But he also treats Cerys very differently. He is much warmer and kinder to other people, and it's very confusing for Cerys. So definitely an enemies to lovers type situation. The embarrassing part about this whole ordeal is that Kingfisher can smell the wild attraction that Cerys has for Kingfisher. She cannot hide it. He can smell her arousal. So that is super awkward. We find out later that Kingfisher was unable to talk about what happened to him for those 111 years. He is not free of that until much later on in the story, towards the very end, when they are back in the vampire kingdom. We'll talk about Everlane here in a minute, but when Everlane is taken by Malcolm and bitten, and she is taken prisoner or captive over to the vampire kingdom, Kingfisher had this whole plan to go with a bunch of soldiers, maybe not a bunch, but more than just him, to go on a rescue mission. Well, Cerys wakes up one day horrified to realize that Kingfisher's gone. He went solo to save Everlane, and he is able to return Everlane for the most part. I was going to say unharmed. No, she was harmed, but she was able to recover later on. We'll talk about that in a minute. But now Cerys and Carrion and Lorith and Renfis have to go on a rescue mission for Kingfisher. So he pretty much just traded himself for Everlane. But the good news is he fares okay. Cerys actually fares worse than him. He returns to his own realm and he's completely fine. He seeks treatment for the Quicksilver in his eye by a local witch, as well as Talena. Things I think are going pretty well. I think that's where we left off. What happened to King Bellicon? Unfortunately, the dude gets away. Fisher actually stabs King Bellicon, but this was in the time before the magic was restored to the land. So because this sword didn't carry any power with it, Bellicon survives and he gets away. Bummer. I bet he'll be back in Brimstone. I guess we'll find out. Same with Queen Madra. She gets away. Unfortunately, she'll be back as well, I'm sure. Malcolm, though, there's a happy ending. That dude dies. Yeah, we've already talked about that. But Cerys stabs him in the throat and then beheads him. Goodbye, good riddance. Let's coronate the new queen of the vampires. Oh, but one thing that happens between Malcolm and Carrion, which this is where the big reveal happens, that Carrion is actually not human. He is Fae. That's because Malcolm bites Carrion and he says that he's poisoned. And I thought, oh my gosh. And actually, my original theory on that was that Carrion had actually eaten, is it the wolf's bane or whatever painkiller they were eating? And the thing is, if you chew it, it numbs your pain. If you eat it, ingest it, it will kill you. I forget what it's called. Widow's bane, maybe? I thought he ingested it, which therefore poisoned Malcolm, but that actually was not it. The reason it was poisonous to Malcolm is because he just bit a Fae. Carrion is Fae. That was a twist I totally did not see coming. Let's circle back to Everlane. Okay, Kingfisher's sister. So she gets taken by Malcolm and she is bitten. This woman is on a time clock. If she does not get treatment, she will either die or turn, or something bad is going to happen to her. So they have a very tight deadline in order to recover her and return her to the Fae realm. So when Kingfisher goes on this solo mission to recover his sister, he's able to return her. He opens up a shadow gate. He throws Everlane through the shadow gate, but he does not follow behind. So now we have the 4 people who are trying to go in after Kingfisher. That is, of course, Cerys, Carrion, Lorith, and Renfis. And everyone gets through except for Renfis. Renfis is about to go through that portal. I was gonna call it a portal, but it's like it's a shadow gate. He's trying to go through the shadow gate and it closes on him. So it's left up to the 3 who made it through the portal to recover Kingfisher. Taladeus, we've already talked about. He ends up being a good guy. He is initially presented as a bad guy, second in command to Malcolm, but he's in league with Kingfisher and he's the one that presents the option to Kingfisher and is like, hey, I can save her life. Let me bite her. Kingfisher's like, okay. It was more grand than that. Don't take that seriously. Ooh, Lorith. I like Lorith. What a sweet individual. That man has the voice of an angel. Apparently. Lorith is the new owner to Danya's old sword because when Cerys reforged it, it bonded to Lorith because he accidentally touched it, spilled his own blood, the sword accepted and was like, ooh, I accept this blood. You are my new owner, which pissed Danya off, but honestly, I didn't care. I bet we're gonna see more of this in Brimstone, but now Lorith has this ability called Angel's Breath, and that magical ability is powered by the sword. Finally, we have Renfis, that is the friend of Kingfisher, a warrior. He was unable to participate in the rescue mission with Kingfisher because he simply just didn't make it through the Shadow Gate. Sorry, Renfis. So anyways, I'm sure we'll see him appear in Brimstone along with all of these other characters. So those are my notes on Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I hope they were helpful. If you are like me, you read this book quite some time ago and the details are fuzzy, I hope that I've given you enough to not be totally lost when you get to Brimstone. I hope you plan to read it as soon as it comes out, November 18th, 2025. I'm very, very excited. And actually, I don't know what Callie Hart plans to do with this series. I don't know if it's going to be a duology and this is it, or if she has a longer series in mind. Maybe it's a trilogy, maybe it's something much, much more. I don't know. I can't wait to see what she does. I know this isn't a review video, but I really love this first book, and actually it surprised me. I'm one for romantasy, but I'm not really one for heavy smut or spice, so I was surprised by how much I like this. And I know I'm not alone there. So once again, I hope this video is helpful. I hope that you are as excited about Brimstone as I am. Don't forget to hit subscribe. I hope to catch you in another video, and until next time, I will catch you on the flip side.